Let's discuss it with California Democrat Congressman John Garamendi, who sits on the House Armed Services Committee, and Tennessee Republican Mark Green, who sits on House Homeland Security Committee, and he's also an Afghanistan and Iraq war veteran. Gentlemen, welcome to you both.
Good to be with you.
Okay, I want to play something that the Senate Minority Leader, Democrat Chuck Schumer, had to say today.
The president may not intend to go to war here, but we're worried that he and the administration may bumble into a war.
Congressman Green, what do you make of that assessment?
Well, I think it's unfortunate that that's the position they're taking. I mean, I think we clearly need a measured response here. I think the world needs to see, honestly, smoke and fire. I think Kim Jong-un needs to see smoke and fire. There's been an attack on the U.S. military, and if we don't respond, we're incentivizing future attacks. I think it's time to act.
Well, Congressman Garamendi, what do you make of that? Because you heard what Senator Graham said there, and you hear what your counterpart, Congressman Green, says here about this idea that if we don't respond in some way, that others around the globe may think they can get away with this kind of thing.
Well, we certainly have to respond. The question is, what would be the appropriate response? And then what is the role of Congress in that response? We're clearly into a situation where it could be a war. Any kinetic action against Iran would be an act of war. Now, they may have started it, but now you are in that situation. That does require congressional involvement in that process.
Do you both feel that way, that there's an authorization that needs to happen congressionally?
Actually,
yes, Garamendi.
Well, I certainly do, yes.
Okay.
I don't. I think the War Powers Act is pretty clear. When an attack happens against the U.S. military, the War Powers Act says the president can respond without coming to Congress.
Okay.
That is a defensive response. The defensive issue has passed now. It's been a day and a half since the drone was shot down. We're now into what is a normal, if any war is normal, a response to an action. So this would require, in our view, a authorization by Congress. And it would be wise for the president to seek that, because that would then have the support of the Congress. And we do represent the entire American Republic.
Okay, I'm assuming that the two of you have information I don't have. Yes. Are you both convinced that this drone was shot down by Iran? I mean, they claim responsibility, but that it was in international waters and not in Iranian airspace.
Yes.
Do you agree on that? Or
I'm not sure
you're not
that's
convinced?
even the appropriate criteria here. It was shot down by Iran, and a response is necessary. It doesn't have to be immediate. It has to be a response, whether it's a kinetic response or some other type of response. There is time to do that, and it's also time to rally our allies. We should not be in a situation alone here. Clearly, Iran attacked. Is that an act of war? I would say it certainly rises to that level. How do we respond to that? And that's time. Take a deep breath, think it through, rally our allies, and get the world behind us on this.
Let's give President Trump some credit, though. I mean, he's had a very measured response here. I mean, he even gave them an out with this.
Right.
You know, potentially it was a trigger-happy guy who, you know, so the president is doing this very measured response, and I think it's clearly within his authority to respond.
Okay, let me play something else from Senator Graham today, talking about where there's a, quote, red line. Here's what he said.
My red line is if there's any more disruption of shipping in the Straits of Hormuz linked to Iran, take out their navy, bomb their refineries. If there's any more attack on American interest, go after the Iranians so they'll pay pain. They'll feel pain. That
was actually yesterday. Both a response from you, both starting with you, Congressman Green.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, clearly that's a response, and that is a clear war, no doubt about it. Is that a measured response? I think not. As I said earlier, a response is appropriate. It can come in many different forms. Certainly the sanctions are in place. Is that enough? Probably not. Are there other things that can be done? Measured, somewhat equal. All of those things should be on the table. And as I said, he should come to Congress and say, here's what happened. Here's how we should be responding to that. And Congress should.
Okay. Let me quickly read. I want to read a tweet that comes from a colleague of yours, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, a Democrat freshman. She says, just as in Iraq, aggressors are using illegitimate pretexts to beat the drums of war, just as in Iraq. Our media is taking these claims at face value. Just as in Iraq, children will die, American lives will be lost, and the world will be less safe. Hashtag no war with Iran. Congressman Green, final word to you as a veteran of the Iraq war.
Speaker Pelosi acknowledged today in the press that this was in international waters and our international airspace, and it was an attack on our military. We have to respond. If we don't respond, we're putting our men and women who are in uniform in that theater right now at risk. There will be more attacks. We have to respond, period.
All right. Thank you both for coming in tonight. We know you have a lot to weigh as the White House is undoubtedly burning the midnight oil tonight as well.
They are.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.